There is a hard truth many refuse to face because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't fit nicely into the box of how we were raised or what we were taught about patience, kindness, and forgiveness. But here, Meg, being nice to a narcissist does not help them. It feeds them. It feeds their delusion. See, when you show grace and long suffering to someone walking in pride and manipulation, you may believe you're extending mercy, but in their mind, that mercy is confirmation. It's proof they are right, proof that they can say what they want, do what they want, treat you however they please, and there will still be no consequence, no accountability, no change required of them. That's why some of you feel so drained, so empty. You keep giving the benefit of the doubt. You keep excusing behavior that should not be excused. You say to yourself, maybe if I'm just a little more patient, maybe if I'm just a little more forgiving, they'll see my heart and they'll change. But the truth is, they don't see your heart. They see a mirror that reflects back exactly what they already believe about themselves, that they can do no wrong. Now, I am not saying kindness is weakness. I am not telling you to walk around hard-hearted and cold. But there is a difference between showing love and enabling sin. There's a difference between offering grace and allowing yourself to be used. And with a narcissist, that line is crossed faster than most people realize. They don't respond to niceness the way a broken, humble heart might. They interpret it as superiority. Your quiet, forgiving spirit becomes their stage to perform louder, bolder, more destructively. You have to see it clearly. Being nice becomes part of the problem when it feeds pride instead of breaking it. When Jesus spoke to the Pharisees, he didn't coddle them. He didn't stroke their egos. He called them out. He exposed the lie. He brought light where there was darkness, not by staying silent or being endlessly accommodating, but by standing in truth even when it was uncomfortable. Some of you have been trapped in this thinking for so long you don't even know who you are anymore. You've been so focused on being the bigger person, you've forgotten there's a cost to that. A cost paid in your peace, your sanity, your sense of self-worth. And that is not what you were made for. You were not made to live in quiet bondage so someone else can walk around in loud arrogance. It's not easy to say, but it must be said in kindness without wisdom becomes permission. Mercy without boundaries becomes fuel for someone else's sin. So if you find yourself stuck in that place, remember, your peace matters. Your truth matters. Feeding someone else's delusion is not your calling. Standing in the light is. There's something people need to grasp deep in their spiriting. Real strength isn't measured by how long you can endure mistreatment in silence. Real strength is choosing truth over comfort, even when that truth shakes up everything around you. Now, that sounds good until you have to live it, until you stand there face to face with someone who has made a habit of twisting things, of making you feel small just to make themselves feel big. And in that moment, you feel the weight of a choice. Do you speak up or do you keep the peace? Do you confront the reality staring you in the face, or do you pretend a little longer because pretending feels easier? The world will tell you to play it safe. The world will tell you, don't stir the pot, don't cause conflict, just smile and move on. But I'm here to tell you that silence in the face of wrong is not peace. It's partnership with the lie. That's not strength. That's surrender dressed up in politeness. And you can't walk in truth while partnering with lies. There's something about a narcissist that makes this choice especially hard. They know how to push the right buttons. They know how to spin the story. So if you dare to speak, you end up looking like the problem. That's why so many people stay quiet. That's why so many choose comfort over truth. Because standing up costs something. It costs the image people have of you. It costs relationships you might have spent years building. It costs peace in the moment, even though it brings real peace in the long run. But hear this, choosing truth is always worth the cost. Always. Because truth is where freedom lies. Truth is where healing begins. And you cannot heal what you will not face. You cannot break chains you refuse to acknowledge are there. Some of you have been waiting for the right time, waiting until it feels easier, until you're stronger, until they're in a better mood. But that moment rarely comes. The longer you wait, the deeper the roots grow. And those roots will wrap themselves around your heart. If you let them, you'll wake up one day and wonder why you feel so weighed down, so tired, so lost. It's because you traded truth for comfort, and that trade is never in your favor. Now, I'm not telling you to go out looking for a fight. I'm not saying every moment requires a confrontation, but there are times, clear, undeniable times, when the only way forward is through the fire of honesty. When looking someone in the eye and saying, this is not right, is the most loving, most righteous, most necessary thing you can do. Don't let fear of discomfort keep you trapped in cycles God never meant for you to live in. True strength doesn't hide from the light. It stands in it unafraid, even when it costs something. There's a lie too many of us have been taught to believing that setting boundaries is somehow unkind. That drawing a line and saying, you can't cross this, makes you selfish or hard-hearted. But listen closely. It's not cruelty. It's survival. It's wisdom. You cannot keep pouring yourself out for someone who only takes and never gives. That's not love. That's not faithfulness. That's self-destruction. With a narcissist, this becomes even more clear, because the moment you try to set a boundary, they will act like you've committed some kind of sin against them. They'll say you're the problem. They'll tell everyone around you how unreasonable you are, how cold you've become, all because you dared to say no. But just because they call it wrong doesn't make it wrong. What they call harsh, God calls wise. What they see as rejection is actually protection. Protection for your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Think about a city with no walls, no gates, no doors. That city isn't open-hearted, it's exposed. Anyone can come in. Thieves, enemies, strangers with bad intentions, they all have full access. That's not hospitality, that's foolishness. Your soul is no different. If you don't build some walls, if you don't have some gates that open and close with discernment, you're not being holy. You're being vulnerable in all the wrong ways. Some believe keeping the peace means letting everything slide. But real peace isn't built on avoidance. Real peace comes from structure, from order, from knowing where your responsibilities end and someone else's begin. You are not responsible for someone else's pride. You are not responsible for fixing their brokenness. That weight isn't yours to carry. Boundaries make sure you remember that. They remind you that love doesn't mean losing yourself to someone else's demands. And there's another truth. Boundaries help them too, even if they don't see it. A person walking in pride and manipulation needs limits. Without limits, there's no reason for them to look at themselves honestly. Without limits, there's no pressure to change, no need to grow. You putting up a boundary might be the first time they feel the consequences of their actions. It might be the first whisper in their ear that says, you can't keep living like this. But whether they learn or not, whether they change or not, that part isn't up to you. Your part is to stand firm. Your part is to guard the space God gave you to steward your mind, your heart, your purpose. Some doors need to close. Some lines need to be drawn in the sand and never crossed again. It's not easy. It won't always feel good in the moment. But in the long run, it's the only way to stay whole, to stay free, and to stay in step with the life God has actually called you to live. One of the biggest traps people fall into when dealing with a narcissist is believing that silence is harmless, that if you just stay quiet, things will smooth over, that maybe if you let it slide one more time, they'll get the message on their own. But the truth is, silence in the face of manipulation isn't harmless at all. Silence becomes silent agreement. When you say nothing, when you do nothing, when you let those little jabs, those controlling moments, those twisted half-truths slide by without response, you are, without meaning to, giving permission. You're telling things, keep going, I'll allow it. And a narcissist doesn't miss that signal. That's why it feels like things keep getting worse. Why every time you think you've reached the limit, they push a little further. It's not because they're just bold. It's because they're shown them to keep room moving. Manipulation grows in that quiet space where no one is brave enough to call it what it is. Now, I'm not here telling you to go looking for a fight. I'm not saying every single word needs a rebuttal. Every action needs a speech. But there comes a point where staying silent is no longer peacekeeping. It's participating. There's a weight that comes with constantly swallowing your voice just to keep the appearance of peace. And it builds up. It shows up in your thoughts, in your stress, in the way you can't sleep at night. That weight is your spirit telling you something's out of order. Some of you already know what I'm talking about. You've sat in those, heard those comments, seen those manipulations play out in front of others, and said nothing because it felt safer. But let me ask you this: safer for who? Because it's not safer for your soul. It's not safer for your heart. And it's not safer for the person walking in pride either. When no one speaks, no one learns. When no one stands, nothing changes. Sometimes that means opening your mouth and saying the hard thing. Sometimes it means stepping away completely, removing yourself from the equation. So there's nothing left to manipulate. Both are choices. Both are acts of strength, and both are necessary depending on the moment. You don't always need to argue. You don't always need to explain yourself, but you do need to make sure your silence isn't giving permission for something you know is wrong. The enemy loves a quiet room full of lies, loves it when truth is locked up tight behind polite faces. But we weren't called to live that way. We were called to walk in light. We were called to live in truth. That means learning when to speak up, when to step away, and never mistaking silence for peace when all it's really doing is keeping you bound. There's something many carry quietly in their hearts without even realizing it. You look around and wonder why you feel so heavy, so worn down, like every step forward is a struggle. And if you look closer, what you'll often find is that you're carrying things God never asked you to carry. You're walking through life trying to hold up somebody else's pride, somebody else's sin, somebody else's broken ways. You see their flaws, you see their patterns, and instead of laying that weight down, you strap it on your back like it's your responsibility to fix them, to save them, to hold their world together. But hear me clearly. You were not designed to carry someone else's pride and sin as your burden. That was never your assignment. God calls us to love one another, yes, to serve one another, yes. But nowhere does it say you are responsible for carrying the weight of someone's unrepentant heart, especially when that heart is filled with manipulation, arrogance, and refusal to change. See, that's the dangerous thing about dealing with a narcissist. They'll make you believe everything is your fault. If they're angry, it's because you didn't handle things right. If they lie, it's because you didn't trust them enough. If they hurt you, It's because you provoked it somehow. And over time, you start to believe it. You start to take it on like it's yours to fix. Like if you just try harder, love harder, pray harder, it'll all get better. But that's a trap. That's not humility. That's bondage. Understand this, the cross you're called to carry is your own. It's your own sin, your own struggles, your own obedience to God. You're not called to take up the weight of someone else's refusal to walk in truth. That's between them and God. You can speak truth, you can set boundaries, you can pray, but the outcome, that's not in your hands. And the longer you carry what isn't yours, the more you'll find yourself bent under a weight that crushes rather than builds. You'll start losing sight of who you are, what you believe, and where you're supposed to go. Your identity gets wrapped up in holding together something that was never meant to stand in the first place. That's not the life God called you to live. When you finally lay that burden down, when you finally say, this is not mine to carry, something happens. You start to stand up straighter. You start to walk lighter. You start to see more clearly. And you realize that letting go isn't abandoning someone. It's releasing both them and yourself into the hands of the only one who can truly change hearts. You were not made to be someone else's foundation. You were made to stand on the foundation God has already laid for you, firm, steady, and unshaken by the weight of someone else's pride. One of the hardest things for people to accept is that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. There's a voice inside, especially when you care about someone, that whispers, stay a little longer, maybe it'll get better, maybe they'll change if you just show a little more patience. But that voice isn't always telling you the truth, because there comes a time when staying is no longer strength. It's a slow surrender of everything you were called to be. And walking away isn't weakness. Walking away is an act of faith. See, when you're dealing with a narcissist, they will do everything in their power to make you believe that leaving is failure, that stepping back means you've lost. But that's their trap. And too many get caught in it. They'll say things like, you're giving up, or you never really cared. But here's the truth. When you've done all you can, when you've spoken truth, when you've set boundaries, and there's still no change, still no humility, that's when you have to trust that walking away isn't giving up. It's handing the situation over to God's justice and God's provision. We're not meant to save everyone. That's not our job. That's God's work. And when we hold on too tightly, refusing to let go, refusing to release, someone who refuses to change, we're not helping them. We're not helping ourselves. We're standing in God's way. Sometimes God needs its space we refuse to make by staying too long in places we were meant to leave. Sometimes that's the only way someone else faces the consequences that wake them up. And if they never do, that's between them and the Lord. Now, this isn't about bitterness. This isn't about walking away anger in your heart or wishing harm on anyone. This is about recognizing when a season has ended. There's nothing holy about holding on to what God is telling you to release. You can't carry your purpose, your peace, and someone else's dysfunction all at once. Eventually, something's going to break, and it shouldn't be you. It takes faith to let go. Faith that even though it feels uncertain, God's already ahead of you. Faith that even though they may call you the villain, even though the story may get twisted, you're walking in obedience, not opinion. Faith that God's justice doesn't need your help to run its course. You can trust him with that. Too many people stay trapped because they believing makes them weak. But it takes real courage to look at a situation, look at a person, look at years of history and still say, I choose to step back. I choose to trust God more than I trust my own effort. That's not failure. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's strength. That's freedom.